The planet Earth was consumed by the water of the oceans. All continents were submerged as the waters rose. Human civilization was submerged, and humanity fell. But marine life thrived and evolved greatly with it. While we see entire cities underwater, we also see two people in diving gear and a harpoon. They are father and son, and they are searching for supplies. They arrive at what appears to be an old convenience store. The son's name is Bota, and he calls out to his father upon finding a shelf full of canned food. The father tells him to take everything useful and put it in the cart. Bota asks what's written on the can, and the father says it's powdered milk. He says that his son's reading is poor and that he needs to study more. Bota sees his father picking up some forks and says they already have plenty and don't need more. But the father says you never know what might happen, so the more, the better. The father says they already have enough, and it's for the son to hold tight. He activates a mechanism and several air balloons begin to lift them to the surface. Bota looks at the city and says it's now called ruins, and that his father tells stories of how in the past all this was a place teeming with people. When they reach the surface, there is a small boat waiting for them. The boat also had a little girl waiting for her father. The father calls her Lita and asks if she found anything interesting, but she says no, and her father says there must be no place for birds to rest nearby. Bota affirms that they haven't seen a bird in months, and asks his father if there really are any people alive besides them, but the father says he's sure there are more people alive, and they just haven't found them because the ocean is too big, and until they find someone the father will protect them with his life. But the two little siblings also need to help each other, as they are all in the same boat. The father was responsible for hunting and repairing the boat. Bota took care of water and food, and Lita took care of dirty laundry and cleaning. Exploring the ruins was also a job only the father did, and it was only recently that he started letting Bota hunt near the surface, and that recently he also could go with his father to the ruins. With a kind of crane they retrieve things from the sea, and inspecting these things is the favorite activity of the siblings. But when the sun sets, they all have an absolute rule to follow, using watches in the sight of the sun. They all run into the boat. Bota says he forgot to put away the fish, but the father tells him to get in and pushes him down, while slowly closing the door along with the sunset. The night comes with a starry sky, but inside the boat the three are together in silence, when suddenly they feel an impact and Bota says they have arrived. The monsters. Yes, there are monsters in the water now, and the monsters are nocturnal, and we see several of them around the boat. The monsters start banging on the boat, and Bota is very scared, telling the monsters to go away, but his father puts his hand on him and tells him to calm down, that they're just going to bang on the boat out of curiosity and then leave. The father hugged them until the monsters left, and after the situation calmed down the father put the two to sleep. But Bota asks if where his father lived also had monsters. He says yes, since they live anywhere in the water, but he says there were also harpooners who were warriors, who fought monsters to protect the cities, and that he was also a harpooner. This tattoo is the proof. Bota asks what are those strange dots below the symbol. The father says they are not dots but stars, and Bota asks what a star is. The old man forgot that Bota doesn't know what a star is since he's always inside the deck at night. He explains that stars are almost like small jewels shining in the sky. But the siblings are already asleep when the father finishes telling the stories of the stars. He says his wish is to show the two how beautiful it is at night. The next day when they go up to see the boat, the monsters ate even the fish they had forgotten, including leaving claw marks inside the boat. The father says it's not a problem, and he will repair the boat. The important thing is that they stayed safe. Bota asks if the father wants him to go to the ruins to get parts. The father gets angry, saying he's crazy to go there alone. Monsters may be hiding in the ruins. Bota says they were there yesterday, but the father says it's only because he was sure it was safe, and then he forbids Bota and Lita from going to the ruins until they turn 17. Bota starts arguing, saying he's not a child anymore, and he can fend for himself, and that there's nowhere else to go beyond the ruins, as everything around has become ocean. When the father was about to respond, Lita interrupts and tells them to look over there, and she points to a bunch of birds. The father shouts to hoist the sails, that they will follow the seagulls. They arrive at a completely destroyed building that has now become a mini island. The children tell the father they saw people and start shouting, but the father tells them not to make noise and to stay inside the boat, that he will go there to check the building, and if something happens to him, they should flee. The father jumps into into the water and swims to the building. When he gets there, he appears in front of a hole in the building and asks if there's anyone there. No one answers as he sees a staircase. He goes up and finds a green door, and when he enters we see 4 dead people. Meanwhile on the boat, Bota and Lita are happy, hoping they are nice people. But Bota is surprised by something in the sea. He thinks it's a person. Returning to the father, he is rummaging through things and finds 2 explosives. When he notices that the part where he is has a huge hole, that the iron bars are twisted inwards, and outside we see marks of giant claws. The father feels a chill just imagining the monster that did this, and at the same moment, he hears the children calling for him. As soon as he returns to the boat, Lita says that Bota is trying to go to the water, and the father asks why. Bota says there's someone in the water, but when we see it up close it's a trap. The father screams, saying it's not a person, but it's too late. A gigantic monster appears under the boat. The father grabs the 2 children, already anticipating that the monster will. My god, look at the size of this thing. It lunges and grabs the entire boat in one bite. The 3 remain inside the boat, and now face to face with this monstrosity. The monster makes another attack and completely obliterates the boat. Bota falls into the water, but his father is quick enough to grab him back, and the 3 are left on what remains of the rear of the boat. But the monster doesn't even give them time to rest and launches an attack with its tail. So the boat is wrecked and the father and the 2 brothers are thrown straight into the building. Meanwhile, the monster approaches the building. Bota wakes up, disoriented, in his father's arms. He begins to scream his sister Lita's name, thinking she's dead. The father reassures Bota, saying she only fainted from the shock. But it's only when Bota asks if his father is okay that they realize the father has been impaled by an iron bar from the construction, piercing his abdomen. Bota is desperate, but his father tells him he needs him and asks him to take Lita and get out of there as fast as possible. So Bota puts Lita on his back and runs to try to get into the building. The father tries to free himself from the iron bar, enduring intense pain. To make matters worse, the monster surfaces and approaches the father with a terrifying expression, almost his entire body exposed. The father is puzzled as to why the creature is surfacing during the day despite the burning sun. The monster stares fixedly at the iron bar, piercing the father. It starts reaching for its sword on its back, ready to attack, but then it notices Bota and Lita running a bit further ahead. This monster is really smart. It gives a wicked grin, leaves the father, and goes after the children. The father yells for Bota to run faster, and when Bota looks back, fear is evident in his eyes. The monster begins to chase them with its mouth open wide. Bota finally reaches the hole and enters the building. The monster tries to bite them anyhow, and its teeth penetrate the concrete. Seeing its failed attempt, it tries to grab the siblings with a kind of tongue, sensing them and preparing to launch a piercing attack. The monster misses Bota with its attack, but it doesn't stop there. It starts unleashing a barrage of attacks. Bota manages to dodge some while carrying his sister until he finds shelter under a concrete wall. Bota realizes it's gone silent, and maybe the monster has left. When he peeks out, he sees a figure of his father. As he calls out to him, it turns out to be another monster that had disguised itself. Once again, it deceives the siblings with this trap. The father clone begins to disintegrate, revealing that it was actually the tongue that had transformed. It grabs Bota and pulls him out of the building. As the monster is about to devour Bota, his father appears and chops off the monster's tongue with his sword. The monster screams in pain as the father slides the sword across its body. Despite being injured and carrying his son, the father confronts the monster, which looks furious. He tells Bota to stay behind the rocks while he fights the monster. Once again, he's amazed by the size of this leviathan, but he can't dwell on its size because if he dies there, his children will too. The father ties himself with a rope leading to the top of the building on a crane already in the structure. But before reaching the top, the monster is coming towards him, so he grabs a wooden log, and gathering all his strength, he managed to pull out the log and drive it right into the middle of the monster. Bota, who is watching the scene down below, thinks about how amazing his father is. The log gets stuck in the monster's mouth and keeps it open. His father grabs the sword and starts slicing the monster's face. But suddenly the log that the father was leaning on breaks, and he falls into the monster's mouth, being pierced by the creature's teeth. Bota watches from afar the father's last moments. The father looks sadly at his son and remembers the moments he spent with his 2 children and the fear he felt of not being able to protect them. Looking at his son, the father says he loves Bota and lets the sword fall to the ground. He takes the bombs he found earlier, asks his son to take care of Lita, then he explodes along with the creature. In the explosion, Bota is thrown, and the creature falls into the sea. The boy watches as the creature sinks and calls for his father. Now Bota is on top of a small ruin, holding his father father's weapon. He returns to the boat, calling for his sister, and finds her in a corner, crying. He asks his sister what happened and where their father is, and she points to the sea. When Bota looks, he sees his father's body floating, split in half. The girl despairs and starts screaming for their father, but Lita holds her brother back from jumping into the sea. When he looks at his sister, he sees only a skeleton and starts screaming in despair. A storm is falling upon the concrete island, and the boy wakes up beside his sister. It was all just a dream. He looks at his sister sleeping and starts crying, thinking about his father. Now he knows his father wasn't treating him like a child but was protecting them both from the sea monsters. Bota embraces his sister, realizing they're alone now. In the morning, Bota finds their boat and asks Lita to help find something useful, but she asks where their father is. The boy wonders if his sister could handle the truth about their father. He looks at her, and she starts crying, asking why their father isn't there if he died and is with their mother now. Bota can't bear to look at her crying anymore, and they end up embracing on the small island, crying together. As the day passes, they gather the materials left by the boat. They find the boat's clock still working, but since the monster attacked during the day, the clock isn't as useful anymore. The siblings' stomachs start rumbling, but when Bota asks his sister if she's hungry, she pretends to be strong and says no, even though her stomach is growling. The older brother tries to cheer up the girl, searching for something they could fish with until he finds the forks he collected with their father. He remembers even complaining that there were already too many forks on the boat, but according to their father, it was always good to have a few more. The boy manages to make a small harpoon and goes to the sea in search of some fish. This time, when he looks at the water, he's afraid to enter. He starts thinking the monster might still be alive, so his sister holds him back, asking him not to go because the monster might still be there. He agrees with Lita, and they see a crab passing by, which ends up being their dinner. But since they found only a few, Bota lets his sister eat them all. The hungry boy starts thinking he needs to figure out a way for them to survive. He collects rainwater to drink and remembers that his father taught him how to desalinate seawater for drinking, but with this method, they would get little water. The siblings are happy to see the experiment was successful. They celebrate not having to worry about water scarcity anymore. The boy is feeling a bit more confident that he will be able to survive on the island. He thinks he needs to memorize the layout of the building and starts exploring it with Lita. Bota helps his sister climb the stairs and reaches the green door their father saw earlier. After entering the room, the first thing the siblings notice is the skeletons full of bugs, and they feel disgusted. Lita hugs Bota in fear, and he explains that they must have been residents of the island and that it's better for them to grab whatever is useful and leave the place soon. They find a cloth, a canister with gasoline. Bota picks up the bomb and remembers that it's similar to the one his father used when he exploded with the sea monster. The boy wonders if he'll be able to fight the monsters like his father did. He looks at the skeletons on the floor and thinks they were also a family, worrying if he'll be able to protect his sister from ending up like them. They light a fire, and Bota continues working on the fork harpoon while his sister hunts for crabs. The boy knows he needs to enter the water to hunt, and if the creature appears again, at least he has the sword his father left behind. He can use the sword to protect Lita, just as his father wished in the end. The boy notices a small button on the sword's handle, and after pressing it, smoke starts coming out of the sword. It propels the boy forward, and he ends up hitting a wall face first. Blood starts flowing from Bota's nose, and his sister appears, saying she found something strange. Lita shows a door on the floor, and he notices a small hole in its corner. After pushing the door, they discover a staircase leading to a lower floor. Bota starts descending the stairs and hears a noise coming from the depths. The boy gets scared but keeps going down, and suddenly a giant fish jumps out of the water. At the bottom of the stairs, several fish can be seen swimming. Bota gets excited to see the fish and dives in. He notices the fish are many and very big, and he quickly manages to catch one with the harpoon. Now he believes that with water and food, they'll be able to survive. But then something shiny appears in the distance. When Bota gets closer to see what it is, he realizes he's surrounded by sea monster eggs. Suddenly, one of the eggs starts cracking, and a claw emerges from it. Bota swims desperately to get away from the eggs, realizing he is in the monster's nest. The newly born creature grabs him and tries to bite his leg. The boy fights back and thrusts the harpoon into the monster's eye, causing it to swim to the bottom, screaming in pain. As the monster is at the bottom, staring back at him, Bota manages to reach the stairs. But as soon as he does, a hand emerges from the water, trying to grab him. The monster emerges from the water, heading towards the boy, who swings swings the sword, shouting for the monster to stay away from him. The monster lunges towards Bota. Fortunately, the boy manages to dodge it, climbs the stairs, and closes the door. The sea monster continues attacking, clawing at the door, so the boy thrusts the sword into the door, trying to hit the monster below. The monster stops attacking, and the boy thinks it might be dead. Bota puts several pieces of concrete against the door to prevent the monster from getting through. Only then does he realize his sister isn't there. A boy starts calling for Lita until he reaches a window and sees his sister at the edge of the island. He shouts for her to come back and stay away from the water, but she points at something in the sea. The boy sees a figure in the water that looks like a person and panics, thinking the monster is still alive. Suddenly, Lita gets into the boat and starts rowing. She looks at her brother, saying their dad has returned, but he screams for her to come back, saying that the figure isn't their father. At that moment, the clocks start chiming, and Bota looks at the horizon, realizing it's getting dark. He jumps into the sea, trying to reach his sister. Underwater, Bota can see many monsters emerging from their dens. He surfaces, and his sister tells him to get into the boat, but instead, he starts pulling the boat. They reach a small ruin, and Lita starts climbing it. Bota notices a monster coming, and the creature tries to attack his leg, but he dodges. The siblings hug each other in the small ruin while several monsters swim around them. Bota knows that even near the island, if they jump, they'll be caught by the monsters. The monsters start hitting the ruin, and Bota knows if they keep doing it, it'll break, and they'll become fish food. When he thinks there's nothing else he can do, he remembers his father, who died to protect them both. Then, he gathers the courage to protect his sister. Bota attacks the monster with the sword, making a gash in its head, and it falls into the sea. When the boy thinks he has defeated the monster, two more appear behind them, trying to devour the siblings. The boy doesn't give up and attacks the monsters with the sword, but as the monster falls, the structure also starts collapsing. Bota grabs his sister as they fall, manages to push off the structure, and jumps over the monsters, landing with her in the boat. The siblings look scared as one of the creatures starts devouring the one Bota had defeated, and several others appear to try to eat the monster. They take advantage of the chance to row back to the island, but the monsters notice and start going after them. Fortunately, they're faster and manage to reach the island before the monsters catch up. The sea monsters keep coming, and the siblings run into the building and climb the stairs. Bota tries to cut the steps to stop the monsters from climbing, but it's very difficult. Then he sees the monsters entering the building, running towards him. He continues to strike the stairs to prevent the monsters from climbing. The monsters hang onto the steps, trying to catch Bota. One higher up attacks the boy and manages to tear his back. Finally, the steps break, and the monsters fall to the ground. Bota and Lita look down as the monsters start scratching the walls, trying to climb up but failing. They collapsed on the ground, relieved. Then Lita reminds her brother that he's injured. The two enter a room when they come face to face with the monster Bota thought he had defeated earlier. They tremble in fear, and the monster starts attacking Bota. When the monster is about to devour the boy, Lita sticks a piece of iron into the creature's eye and shouts for it to let go of her brother. Bota is surprised by his sister's action, and the monster, now with both eyes pierced, moves towards Lita. She stands still with her back against the wall, and the monster can hardly see her. It approaches and sniffs the girl. Lita becomes desperate as the monster is literally leaning against her. Bota seizes the opportunity to shout at the monster with a gallon of gasoline in hand. The monster looks at him and, without hesitation, leaps towards him. Bota throws the gasoline gallon right into the monster's mouth, causing it to dodge just as the monster was about to bite him. The monster crashes into the wall and, stunned, stands there with the gasoline gallon in its mouth. Bota takes advantage of this opportunity to use a slash from his sword, not on the monster, but on the iron bars, creating sparks that ignite the gasoline on the ground, leading to a path of fire towards the monster, which burns in flame. Taking advantage of all this, Bota grabs Lita and begins to climb the stairs, but he accidentally knocks over the box containing the bomb. He tells Lita to duck as it's going to explode, and a few seconds later, the explosion is so massive that it brings down the entire building. The children survive somehow, and as the building collapses, they are lucky enough to fall into the water. But in a world where monsters roam the ocean, falling into the water might not be considered luck. The debris collapses on top of the eggs below the building, killing most of them. Bota and Lita manage to cling to one of the debris pieces and see that the island building has sunk. We see an almost terrifying scene with a clawed hand appearing behind Bota, who looks back and sees a monster staring at him intently. Not just one, but several of them them appear. Bota and Lita find themselves with no chance of getting out of this. The monsters start attacking Bota. In an act of desperation, he swings his sword with little success. He defends himself from one of them biting him with his sword, and just when all seemed lost, we see a projectile hitting the monster from behind. Bota and Lita look to see who it is, and indeed, it's another person, a woman with white hair, an eye patch, and two large swords. Quite beautiful, I must say. The monsters head towards her. She draws a weapon that seems to shoot harpoons or steel arrows, which start destroying all the monsters, almost hitting the sibling. As she shoots with her weapon using only one hand, the monsters seem to realize that they are safer in the water and advance beneath her. Bota and Lita watch as the monsters head towards the stranger. A monster approaches them from behind. Bota dodges the monster, protecting his sister, and attacks the creature with his sword, but this time the monster manages to literally hold off the blow, and with the other hand, it prepares to strike Bota. The boy screams in panic, and then the monster is hit by several small harpoons and falls. Bota looks back and sees the girl who saved him. He shouts to her that there's a monster coming from behind. She was reloading her weapon and unable to dodge. The weapon fell into the sea, and she got injured in the arm. Several other monsters prepare for a new attack. She draws the two swords on her back and heads towards them, slicing each of the creatures with the swords. Bota watches as the stranger easily dispatches the leviathans, continuing to cut down the monsters before her, even those fearful of her. Bota and his sister look at the monsters strewn around them. One of them opens its mouth and tries to attack the siblings, but the warrior perceives the threat and surprises even the siblings, leaping onto the monster with her two swords. The two watch as she stands amidst several defeated monsters, until she turns and looks at the monsters floating in the sea. She looks at the siblings, who are embraced and scared, wondering if she would be a good person. Bota thinks she saved them, but she still almost hit them when she threw the harpoons, so she could be an enemy. Finally, she talks to the siblings, saying they're lucky to find a harpooner out in the open sea. Bota is surprised by what she said and remembers his father's story about the harpooners, warriors who fought against sea monsters. The girl introduces herself as Kana and says she's from Union Busan. Bota asks what this Union Busan is, and behind Kana, they can see something floating. Kana looks back, and the siblings wonder if what they're seeing is an island. Bota and Lita look surprised because what's before them are actually three gigantic ships. On the ship ahead, Union Busan is written on its bow. The ships approach the siblings, who are impressed by their size. Bota says the ship is so big it looks like an island. Then, suddenly, the water near the siblings starts bubbling, but it's not a monster but rather a type of submarine, which further surprises them. A guy Kana calls Brune emerges from the submarine, and more people start coming out of it. Bota looks at these people and those on the ship. It's the first time he's seen anyone other than his family. The boy starts crying with emotion. Lita tells her brother they must be safe. Bota hugs his sister and mentally talks to his father, telling him they're finally safe. Lights come out of the ship and illuminate the siblings, who are on what's left of the island. Some smaller boats approach where the siblings are, and they watch as Kana gives orders for the other harpooners to check the area. She talks to a guy she calls Dr. Foyd through a communicator. This doctor, who is at the bottom of the sea, responds that nothing living remains down there, and that she could have left at least one alive for him. Brune responds that she would never leave a sea monster alive. According to the doctor, they would have problems if all those monsters had hatched. One of the doctor's assistants calls him to see something, and the doctor looks at the thing and calls it Kentrasi. They are facing the giant monster that attacked the siblings before. Brune and Kana, who are listening to the conversation, are surprised because Kentrasi is one of the 7 sea demons. The doctor asks if it was Kana who defeated this monster too, and the girl replies that it wasn't her, so he wonders who could have been able to kill the creature. Kana looks at Bota's sword stuck in the body of one of the monsters and looks at the siblings, who are in a boat further away. The two are looking at each other happily for being safe. On the boat, a guy starts asking the siblings questions. He says, judging by their appearance, they must have been adrift for at least a year, but Bota explains that it must have been about 10 years. The guy doesn't believe the siblings' story and asks them to tell the truth, and Lita gets angry, saying he's not lying, which only makes the employee more furious. So Bota says they were with their father, but their father was taken by a sea monster. The guy finally introduces himself as Lee and says he will take care of the siblings. Any doubts they have, they can talk to him. So Bota asks asks who all these people are, and Lee replies that they are all harpooners. Bota thinks they're the ones who protect people from sea monsters, and what his father told wasn't just a story. Lee explains that the siblings were saved by a special harpooner because Kana is one of the 3 stars. The harpooners mark the number of sea monsters they've killed on their bodies. Each star represents 100 monsters they've defeated. Bota then says that 6 stars mean at least 600 defeated monsters. Lee starts laughing because a harpooner could get at most 4 stars. 6 would be a legend, and Bota remembers seeing 6 stars in his father's tattoo. Kana and other harpooners approach the siblings' boat, saying they now have permission to board. They take a look at the siblings and then turn their faces. She's carrying Bota's sword. The boy notices and shouts for her. Kana and Brune talk about the sea monster Skutum. Due to its hard shell, no attack worked, even with all the harpooners from the Union Busan ship. According to Kana, he was not killed by the harpooners. He devoured people and left after being full. But it seems that Kana doesn't believe in this version of the story. A woman is calling for Kana to hide. She's being devoured by a monster, while Kana is crouched, trying to hide. Young Kana watches as several people are devoured by the crab monster, and the current Kana tells the other harpooners that the monsters think humans are just food. Brune wonders if that's why she hates sea monsters so much. On the siblings' boat, they are warned that they have reached the entrance. It is gigantic. The siblings disembark on the Union Busan and receive some of their belongings that were found. Lee says he will provide a temporary home for them, and Bota and Lita are confused because this means they will stay on the ship. But according to Lee, they have to go through a trial period and may be expelled. The siblings don't even hear this part. They are happy to have a place to stay. Lee looks at the siblings' feet and says they will now need shoes because they cannot walk barefoot there. He asks the siblings to follow him to the market, and they don't even know what a market is. They go through a corridor of the ship, and the two are impressed with how big that place is. Lita, all happy, tells her brother that this ship doesn't sway. Bota looks at a claw that looks a lot like the one they had on their boat, and realizes that in that place, they also collect relics from under the water. They continue walking through the ship, and pass by a place where they seem to be making underwater robots, until Lee says they have reached their destination. Bota and Lita look impressed at a place full of people and very illuminated. They see people selling fish, playing music, and some foods they had never seen before. Until Lee shows them a shoe store, the seller explains that it's 30 nuts for 2 pairs and won't give a discount, and Lee asks if they have anything to trade for the shoes. Bota takes a look in the middle of their things and finds a watch. Unfortunately, the seller already has dozens of those. The siblings keep looking through their things until the seller sees something that he's very interested in, a bottle of whiskey. He said he could trade 2 pairs for the bottle, but Lee interrupted the negotiation, realizing that the seller was trying to deceive the siblings. As the bottle was worth much more, Lee started shouting who wanted to buy the whiskey, and a crowd approached interested. They started bidding on the bottle, and Bota was confused by everything that was happening. In the end, the siblings get the shoes they needed and even several other things. Lita tells her brother that the people there are nice since they gave so much for just 1 bottle, and if she knew, she wouldn't have thrown the others away. But Bota says that at that moment, it was more important for them to collect rainwater than to have alcohol. Lee explains to the siblings that the value of things changes a lot, and they can only trust money there. He points to a door, saying that's where the siblings will stay. The siblings opened the door, curious about what lay inside. They found a bed and various odds and ends, with cobwebs strewn about. Even Lee admitted that the place wasn't very clean. Unexpectedly, the siblings found the place amazing. They flopped onto the dusty bed, enchanted by having a window. Looking at Lee with a startled expression, remarked that the sky was shining, to which he replied that those were stars. The siblings gazed at the sky, enchanted by the stars. Bota remembered a conversation with his father, where he explained what stars were to his son, wishing they could see the starry sky someday. Overwhelmed by memories and the beautiful sight, Bota shed tears. Meanwhile, the cranes of the Union Busan ship, under the doctor's command, hoisted the gigantic monster. Even the ship's workers were surprised by the creature's size. The doctor explained that the monster must be one of the largest ones out there. Brune looked at the monster and asked if he could defeat it, but to the doctor, it was a species to be studied, and he was eager to get his hands on the creature's body. Brune inquired about out Kana's whereabouts, and she was walking around the ship. She entered a room where a researcher seemed to be present. He confirmed that what she had found was true. It was indeed a harpooner's sword. She asked how such a valuable sword ended up there. She said the sword's owner must be that man, the legendary 6-star Leviathan slayer Tianma. The researcher asked what she would do with the sword, and according to her, there would soon be bloodshed. Meanwhile, Bota thought it would be the first time he would sleep looking at the stars. Despite hearing that the harpooners protected the ship, he couldn't sleep. Kana sat observing the sky, pondering that one of the 7 monsters had been killed. By the wounds on her body, it was evident that the battle had been desperate. She wondered if it was the owner of the sword she called Tian who defeated the monster. And why did he defeat the monster? Would it be to protect the children and his family? She hugged her knees and looked at a snow globe, picking it up and thinking about her family. Kana began recounting that she and her father were refugees. They lived on the open sea and scavenged ruins to survive. She recalled finding things and calling them trash, but others said it was like a treasure hunt. One of her peers found the snow globe and gave it to the girl. She saw a different world inside the glass and wondered if that's how people lived before. She changed her mind and tried to return the globe, saying they could sell it and get money with it. Her peers, revealed to be her parents, told her to keep the globe as a gift for her. She smiled, imagining that one day she could live in a place like the one on the globe. The refugees sold what they found to Union Busan and received supplies in return. The giant ship was a source of longing for young Kana. The people who lived there didn't have worries like her, and she wished she could live there too. They had to work hard as refugees, and accidents and attacks by sea monsters always happened, resulting in many deaths. Kana wondered why they had to suffer like that. She heard her father saying they needed to find a treasure. If they found it, they could become citizens of Union Busan. She wondered if there really was treasure amid all that trash. While her father and other refugees searched the ruins, her father found something. He called his companions to see a huge gate, bearing the logo of a heavy industry brand. Upon opening the gate, they saw what seemed to be several small submarines. They got excited about the discovery and retrieved the relic from the sea. Everyone celebrated the find while Kana looked on, wondering if that was treasure. Her father explained that they had found an underwater exploration unit, and with the discovery, they would be able to become citizens of Union Busan, celebrating and thinking that now they wouldn't wander anymore. Everyone was celebrating until a sea monster appeared. Kana could only watch as her family and friends fought against the monster. Her mother, caught by the creature, shouted for Kana to hide. Frozen in place, could only call for her mother. The men tried to fight the creature using axes, but the monster's shell was too hard, and they ended up being crushed. A smaller boat began to approach, and the men inside debated whether they should get closer, but they were noticed by the monster, which advanced with its claw. It stopped, and the men were confused. Then several spikes began to come out of the claw towards the boat, which was destroyed. No one appeared to save the girl, and they went to a control room. The father began to ask for help over the radio to Union Busan, while the monster was almost destroying the boat. In the distance, on a small island, someone seems to be fishing. The boy looks in the direction of the boat. Kana's father finally got a response from Union Busan on the radio. Another crew member panicked and began to scream for help. Union Busan said they had no obligation to protect refugees. Kana's father, desperate, said there was a child on the boat and they needed help, but Union Busan refused help and wished them luck. The father of Kana, desperate, said they found the relics, but the monster's paw went through the room and he grabbed Kana's father, who was screaming for him. Her father asked her to try to escape, and she looked desperate as her father was killed by the monster. She thought that a moment ago she was hugging her parents, and now she no longer has them. She stands right in front of the monster, hopeless after everything that happened. The monster attacks, and before she realizes it, she is in the arms of a young man who tells her not to give up on living. The young man who saved Kana tells her that he will leave her in the care of another survivor, who asks who he is. He introduces himself as Union Busan harpooner Tianma. Kana is impressed with the young man who saved her, and the other survivor gets excited and starts asking about the other harpooners. Tian just says that the boat is going to sink and they must escape while he distracts the monster. The other survivor is shocked to find out that there's only one harpooner, and Tian faces the monster, staring at the creature, wondering if he will be able to pierce the shell. The monster attacks, but he dodges the crab and manages to release the lifeboat, which falls into the sea. Now he prepares for the fight, spinning as he cuts the creature's shell, which which begins to crack. The shell is thicker than he thought. He adjusts the sword to increase its power, and smoke starts to come out of it. He prepares for the monster's next attack and defends himself with the sword, which finally cracks the monster's shell. The creature, not being foolish, backs away. Even Kana notices the retreat. Tian says the monster has never seen anyone like him, and he gets mad with rage. He runs to attack the monster and manages to hit the creature without it retaliating. Kana and the other survivor watched in amazement as he was impressed, and someone managed to fight on equal terms with the monster. The monster's shell begins to crack even more. This time Tian attacks to cut the monster. He gives several blows while being watched by Kana. Tian continued to tear apart the monster's shell, causing it to froth at the mouth as it was sliced. This gave hope to Kana and the other survivors. The harpooner changed the gas in his sword, realizing he needed to end the fight soon, as this was his last canister. The crab monster attacked again, and the warrior became apprehensive. The creature ripped off a huge piece of the boat. Tian thought the creature wanted to sink the boat, so the monster threw the piece towards Kana, leaving the harpooner even angrier. He launched into the attack. The guy who was with Kana got up, and she asked for help because she got stuck in the wreckage. But the guy just ran off screaming and left the girl, pleading for help. Tian continued to attack the monster, which stopped retaliating. At that moment, the survivor ran past Tian, who shouted for him to duck because the monster was preparing to attack. The crab monster launched several spikes at the warrior, who was hit and pinned against the wall. The survivor also couldn't escape and was hit by the spikes. Tian had a spike stuck in his arm and was also hit in the thigh. The spikes immobilized him against the wall. The harpooner looked worriedly at the monster, which advanced towards him, aiming for his neck. He managed to rise and dodge the attack while plunging one of the spikes into the monster and pulling his arm from the wall, creating a hole. Tian spun above the monster and managed to attack its back, continuing to strike with his sword, but the monster fought back and hit the warrior, who was thrown away. He got up with the help of the sword, but was already weak and badly injured. He faced the monster, which was weakened and frothing at the mouth. Tian looked at the horizon. The sun was already rising. The crab began to burn in the light and quickly ran, throwing itself into the sea. Tian was surprised by the monster's escape, which disappeared into the sea. He fell to his knees in gratitude, as he had no more strength left. He remembered Kana and found the girl trapped in a corner of the boat, helping her to get free. She asked if he had managed to kill the monster, but according to him, the monster was full and left because of the sun, and she wondered if the monster would come back. Tian didn't know but said she should be happy to see a new day. Kana revealed that she couldn't be happy because she had just lost her parents to that creature, and he tried to comfort the girl. With the sunrise, the harpooners of Union Busan appeared, but they didn't come to save the refugees. They came to take the relics. A guy from the ship offered to treat the girl in exchange for the relic and gave her the right to be a citizen of the ship. Kana was still in shock from her loss, while one of the Union Busan employees congratulated her on becoming a citizen. According to her, the harpooners were heroes to the residents of Union Busan. They were impressed by a harpooner defeating a giant monster, regardless of all who died in the battle. Kana overheard the ship's employees talking about how refugees worked for free just to gain citizenship. One of them commented that he received an SOS the previous night and pleased said he denied help. The girl was shocked to hear this, and they celebrated, saying they got a relic for free. Then they noticed her presence, standing before them holding a broken bottle. She asked if they were waiting for the refugees to die, and one of the guys asked how she felt after trading her parents' lives for citizenship. She became furious and tried to attack him with the bottle, but he attacked her first and grabbed her by the neck. The guy had the audacity to call her a savage. He said what she did was a crime, and he put handcuffs on Kana, continuing to say they could have killed her. According to him, the harpooners were justice, but the girl called them cowards because when they needed the harpooners, they didn't come. The guy looked at her and kicked her in the stomach, and the three of them joined forces to beat her. One of them said it was for her to learn manners and tried to punch her, but he was stopped by someone, none other than Tian. Tian attacks the guys by spinning, and they fly. Even Kana is surprised by the attack. Tian asks what they think they were doing, hurting a girl. One of the guys shouts that Tian shouldn't interfere with his comrades' work. Harpooner becomes indignant with their behavior, and they decide to retaliate. So, Tian breaks his crutch in anger and threatens the guys. They realize that Tian is serious and retreat before one of them calls Tian a plebeian, warning that if he continues acting like that, he'll be thrown into the sea. He begins to explain to Kana that this ship is not so different from the refugees. The difference is that you fight against people. If she wants to survive, she'll have to get stronger, and Kana wants to know how to become a harpooner, which surprises the warrior. He says it's very difficult, but Kana affirms that she'll do everything to become one. With hatred, she says she'll kill every last sea monster. The girl recounts that she joined the harpooners, where there was no difference between plebeians and elites, and she saw Tian as her ideal harpooner. Kana makes a promise to Tian and feels indebted to him. She wonders if the harpooner sent his children to the ship without knowing that, in fact, he's dead. Kana wonders if Tian could have sent the children to protect her. The sun rises, and at Union Busan and from a message tower, a voice says that its crew are chosen and must contribute to the resurrection of the great Union Busan, and that everyone must work together for this future, like in communist propaganda. Guards stand watch over the crew at higher points. In the scrapyard courtyard, Bota is seen talking to the worker. The boy says he's there to work. The guy looks suspiciously at Bota and says it's better not to because the work is too hard. Bota crosses off another place that asked for work from his list. Elsewhere, the crew member says they don't employ refugees, and the boy starts to feel discouraged after several rejections. Then he sees someone begging for alms, saying they're hungry. Bota gives some coins to the lady, telling her that when he gets a job, he'll give her some more, and she thanks the boy. The old lady reciprocates by giving Bota some seeds, which she says represent hope, and the boy feels better upon receiving them. In the brother's room, they calculate how much money they still have, and Bota says he needs to get a job soon. According to Lee, they need to work and pay taxes, or they'll be expelled, but even trying, Bota can't get a job. The boy decides it's better for them to cut expenses, and Lita says he must have spent money on strange seeds. Lee appears, asking if Bota got a job. Upon learning that he didn't, he says he'll try to help, but warns the boy that it's dangerous work. They go to the lowest part of the ship, and there Lee presents Bota as a strong and healthy young man, which doesn't convince the guy who realizes Bota is just a child. Bota still tries to appear more muscular, and Lee says he'd make a great plumber. The guy thinks for a moment and ends up giving the boy a chance. Lee reminds Bota that he needs to work hard. On this ship, the worst thing is poverty. Even though they're protected from monsters and typhoons, they're not protected from poverty and diseases. The boy agrees without knowing exactly what he meant. The guy calls Bota to work. Another worker explains that they're going to replace the old pipes, and black water splashes on Bota's face while he hammers the pipes. The water stinks of sewage. One of the workers shouts to the boss that the pipes are messed up and don't match the blueprints, and the boss responds that they need to make them match. While Bota takes a shower to get rid of the smell, the boss says he can't find parts for the ship that's already 100 years old, which surprises the boy. Their boss has been a plumber for over 40 years, and Bota asks him when the ship was built. According to the boss, the ship was built when there was still land on the planet, and there were even bigger ships. He recounts that comets collided with the moon and ice fragments fell on Earth, causing the sea level to rise after 70 years of rain. Thus, people began to connect several ships together. None of them were named Union Busan. The other worker says they need to preserve the ship, or it will sink soon, and Bota agrees. Thinking that it's thanks to these workers that the ship can still function, he gets excited to contribute as well. Bota wants to be part of them, and be able to live with Lita on Union Busan. The boy looks at his feet and notices there's a lot of water on the floor. Then behind him something explodes and a lot of water starts gushing out. Another worker says it's a backflow. The boss appears, asking what's going on, and orders them to unclog the pipe. The worker is afraid because the pipe is too deep and they would have to open others too, letting more water in. The boss gets angry, saying they installed the pipes wrong, and the worker explains that he did as they were told. More water starts coming out, and another pipe bursts, throwing everyone against the walls. Even the boss is alarmed by what's happening. Alright, that's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed the video and want more, show your support by subscribing and liking. Until the next video!